Hi guys, my name is Tabby. I am an instructor at the BSC campus for Dakota Nursing Program, and today I want to talk to you guys about concept maps. After every single clinical, I think in my entire career as a nurse educator, concept maps have been the number one question. Everyone wants to know, what do you expect? What do you want? How do I get the best grade that I possibly can? And I thought it would be helpful to put together a little video that can kind of put you guys on the right track to understanding concept maps and to really getting that grade that you guys are desiring. So before we even dive into the concept map and what it should look like or what it could look like, I want to explain to you the purpose of a concept map. I think when we understand what the purpose of the concept map is, it's going to make it easier for you to understand what your instructor is looking for. So a concept map is essentially a picture of your patient. It's not just a list of medical diagnoses and nursing diagnoses and interventions and medications that you put together in a pretty little picture, okay? It is a map to your patient. A way that I like to describe it is, think of it this way. Let's say you're on a unit and you have a patient and you've been caring for this patient all day long and there's some emergency and all of a sudden you have to run out the door and leave before you can give a report to anybody. Okay, that will never happen, but if it did, just play along with me. All right, and let's say for some reason on that shift, you have the opportunity to make a concept map because, as a nurse, you just have plenty of time to do that. Your concept map, you should be able to hand that to another nurse, and by looking at and reading the concept map, it should give them a report on your patient. It should have all of the pertinent details about your patient, so they understand, one, who your patient is. They understand your patient's primary diagnoses. So their entire medical history is on there, both primary diagnosis and secondary diagnoses. Remember I said diagnoses, plural. All of their medical history pertains to that person and creates the picture that is your patient. Okay, now they're understanding what your primary goals are for your patient. Third thing, they are understanding your priorities. Your nursing diagnoses that you choose are your priorities for your patient that day, your priority concerns. So they understand your patient, their history, your primary concerns, and then what have you been doing all day long to reach the goals that you set for your client, your interventions and your goals. And then they're looking at that and they're saying, oh, all this assessment data that fills in the remainder of the report. So when you complete your concept map and it's all done, think of, does this really adequately show someone else what is going on with my patient, who they are, what they're all about, what our goals are, what we're doing to help this patient successfully achieve discharge? Okay, that is the purpose of a concept map, to give your nursing instructor a map to your patient's success. Okay, now when it comes to putting together the concept map, your most important thing that you can do is know your rubric. All right, we hear all the time, well, you grade different than so-and-so, and so-and-so grades different than the other person, and they're looking for this, and you're looking for that. We are all individual people, just like you guys are all individuals, and all of your patients are different. We too, as instructors, are all different people. That's why things are going to be slightly different from one instructor to another. But the bottom line is your rubric does not change. Your rubric stays the same. And we use your rubric as a guide when we are grading you. Okay, so the first thing that you should really do is know your rubric. And this does not just pertain to concept maps. It's to any assignment that you do in nursing school. Know your rubric. Okay, your rubric can be found under clinical paperwork in Blackboard. All right, so here's a copy of the LPN or the PN rubric. All right, when you go to this rubric, you want to come to this far column over here. This is how you get 10 points or full points in that section. Read what is in that box and do it. All right, that is how you will get the grade every single time. Okay, so rubrics are very important. You need to read your rubric, you need to know what our expectations are, and then put that into your concept map. All right, now let's start with a practical example of what it looks like to make a concept map. Okay, so I'm gonna start with a blank piece of paper. All right, and as I write on this, I'm going to keep pulling it up here and showing you guys what I'm talking about. So the center of everything that we are doing is your patient, right? So we are going to create a bubble, and that bubble is going to have your patient in it. All right. So center, we've got our bubble. This is our patient. In here, you could put your patient initials, you could put your patient age. Obviously, no identifying information of your patient. So don't put their name and their birth date and their whole family history because that's a HIPAA violation. So your patient, all right? So we start with our patient. Now, the next thing that we need in our bubble are our medical diagnoses, because without the medical diagnosis, they wouldn't be here in the hospital. There'd be no reason for them to be here. So moving on to that, we're going to start our medical diagnoses. Now, when you look at your rubric here, and it's your first one on there, or your second one on there is medical diagnosis, and it says, clear understanding of diagnoses newly made, chronic, which means long-term, acute, which means just happening now, diagnoses, and the impact on hospitalization or need for health care. You guys, this is more than just one primary diagnosis and one secondary diagnosis. This is their medical history. This is all of their medical diagnoses, okay? Or all of their pertinent medical diagnoses. So now I'm going to create individual bubbles for each medical diagnosis, which is going to be labeled on here as MDX, okay? Medical diagnosis. So let's just say that this patient has 4 of them, okay? So what we're doing right now, you guys, is we are making a skeleton of what your concept map should look like, all right? So we started with our patient, and now we built on, and we added our 4 medical diagnoses for our patient. See those? Individual bubbles for each one. All right. All right. So now we need to move on to our nursing diagnosis. Your nursing diagnosis should reflect your primary goal or your primary concern for your patient. All right. Your nursing diagnosis comes as a result of a medical diagnosis. So if your patient was admitted for, let's just say a laminectomy or a spinal fusion, the medical diagnosis of lumbar stenosis fueled that surgery, okay? Or if your patient was admitted with sepsis, that fueled your nursing diagnosis having to do with infection or hemodynamic instability, all right? So now we're going to take and we're going to make 2 nursing diagnoses. Now remember, this is for the LPN year, so you're only needing 2 nursing diagnoses for this one. So going off of my medical diagnosis here, I am going to create my nursing diagnosis, which is going to be NDX on this example, okay? So I have my patient in the center, my medical diagnoses, and then I have my 2 nursing diagnoses, all right? Now, we need to start with a goal. We need to know what we're trying to achieve, because how can we choose our interventions if we don't even know what we're trying to achieve? So we've got our priority concern, which is our nursing diagnosis. Now we need to establish a goal. All right, so off of your nursing diagnosis, you should have a goal. So we're going to add a goal to each one of these. All right. So now you can see nursing diagnosis, goal. We know what our plan is. We know what it is that we are trying to achieve. So now under each nursing diagnosis, we are going to add, I gotta find a new color here. We are going to add our nursing interventions. All right. I'm running out of color options, you guys. Apparently my marker stash is not so great. All right, so coming off of our goal, now we have our 4 nursing interventions, which is just, I'm just going to put IX, okay? I don't know why I like to use X's, honestly. I started using that as an abbreviation in nursing school, and I still use it to this day. See, there are things you are learning in nursing school now that you will use forever. All right, so we have our 4 interventions that come off of every single one of our nursing diagnoses. Now, I want to talk a little bit about interventions. Your book is filled with all sorts of wonderful, fabulous, very well-worded interventions. But please be realistic. Is this a realistic intervention that you might actually do for your patient? Okay, I have had patients or students who have created concept maps and they have a patient with pain. We are going to do pet therapy with horses, and then they're going to come in and PT is going to work with them, and we're going to do equine therapy and music therapy and acupuncture. Okay, music therapy is probably the only piece of that that's actually a realistic intervention for your patient. While those are wonderful interventions and things that I hope that someday you work in a hospital that is advanced enough to be able to offer those to your patients, the purpose of your concept map is really for you to learn, so that when you are on the floor working as a nurse, you are able to be implementing and right off the cuff can think of all of these interventions that are appropriate, realistic, and attainable for your patient in the setting in which you work. Okay, so I ran out of a little space at the bottom, but we've got our 4 interventions that come off. Okay, now we need to do our evaluation of our goal as well. Was our goal successful? All right, that can come anywhere, honestly, off of your goal. Okay, now you guys, we have a skeleton. This is the skeleton of a concept map. We started with our patient. We added our medical diagnoses. We added our nursing diagnosis based off of our priority concerns for our patients. We established a goal. We included 4 interventions on how we were going to achieve that goal. And then we included an evaluation of how we actually did with that goal. When you're thinking of your interventions, honestly, you guys, when it comes to your concept map, a lot of this you could do before you even get to clinical the next day. It would really help you set the tone for the day. I'm coming in and I know that I'm going to have a patient who had a tonsillectomy. And so I realized that my chief concerns for my patient today are hydration and pain management. So I'm going to come up with a nursing diagnosis having to do with hydration and having to do with pain management. And then I'm going to establish a goal. I want my patient to drink 30 milliliters of water every hour. Okay, that is while on shift. Okay, that is my goal. Now, how am I going to get my child, because I work pediatrics, how am I going to get my child to do that? So that's where we're going to put our 4 interventions. Those are your goals for the day. Try and get those 4 interventions accomplished. Or if you're doing this in hindsight, your clinical is already over. Now, what did I actually do today to improve my patient's pain? How did I collaborate with other specialties? Student nurse will collaborate with respiratory therapy to administer nebulizer treatments. Student nurse will collaborate with physical therapy to improve mobility. How did I delegate today? Did I delegate to another nurse? Did I delegate to a CNA? Did I delegate to another student? Where was my delegation in that? What were my independent steps? What did I do on my own? Student nurse will assess wound Q4 hours. All right, so we're putting in the actual interventions that we did. Now, obviously, there's going to be some you didn't get to or some you would have liked to do but didn't happen, and you can put those in there. That's more than okay. Just please be realistic. And the reason that I say that is because as a nurse, when I was going through nursing school, you guys, I will tell you, I thought care plans were the dumbest thing ever. I thought they were a complete and total waste of my time. And I'm like, you know what? I have so much to learn and my brain is spinning with information. How in the world am I supposed to spend 4 hours putting together a darn care plan? But you know what? When I got on the floor and I started working as a nurse and I had 5 patients that I was responsible for and I had to think on my feet, you know what came back to me? Every single dang care plan I ever filled out. And now I have 4 patients who are in pain, and without even having to think of it, I can rattle off 4 interventions that I can do right now in my place of employment that's within my scope of practice to address their pain. And not every single one of those was a medication. Or now I have my patient who is septic and we're going into a hypotensive state, and without even thinking about it, I already know 4 interventions that I can do right now that are within my scope of practice that fit within the place that I am currently working that I can implement. And I don't have to think about it because by remote practice again and again and again of making a care plan or a concept map, I learned them. You guys, that's why this stuff is important, because you are actually going to use it one day, okay? So we've got our skeleton, all right? Now, if you look at your rubric, this skeleton is actually going to meet almost all of the boxes that are already on your rubric. You're on your way to an A just with this basic information, okay? Because if we look at our rubric, all right, medical diagnoses, check. We listed all of them. Therefore, I know I've got my primary, my secondary, and they're all connected, all right? Oh, I have my 2 nursing diagnoses. They are priorities. They are relevant to my patient because I determined them based off of my primary concern for my patient, all right? Nursing interventions. Oh, look at that. I have 4 of them. They include collaboration, independent care, and delegation because I looked at the things I actually did today and I thought outside of just my discipline and looked at how I worked with other people, and I've already got them in my skeleton. Look, I have my desired outcome. I have my goal, and it's a SMART goal. It's specific, realistic, measurable. It has a time frame. Oh, and look, I've already got my evaluation. All of those pieces are already in there. You know what's missing? All that's missing right now is our supportive data and our connections. All right, you've got some of your connections, but you don't have all of them. So now is when we're going to go back and we're going to see, okay, what supportive data did I have today? What subjective and objective data did I collect while I was on clinical today that fills in all of the gaps on my concept map? All right, do an individual box for everything. All right, if you have all of your interventions in one box or you have all of your assessment data in one box, that shows me nothing. That shows me that you did an assessment, that you collected data, but it does not show me that you understand how this high blood sugar is related to the diabetes. It doesn't show me how poor healing is connected to the diabetes. It doesn't show me how this blood pressure is connected to your septic patient. So individual data needs to be assigned on its own in its own box. I've been a nurse for 8 years. I know exactly how all of that assessment data ties into each individual intervention that you have for your patient and each individual problem, but I'm not assessing my ability to know that. I'm assessing your ability as a student to understand how all of the pieces of your patient come together. That is why individual boxes are so important, because now I can see your critical thinking. I can see that you understand how all of the little minute details of your patient come together to create one comprehensive picture. Okay, so where do we start with adding our supportive data? The first place I recommend starting is with your interventions. That's a very easy place to start. So I have this intervention here that says I'm going to assess my patient's pain every 4 hours. Okay, there should be a little data box off to the side of that that says all of your patient's ratings. At 9 o'clock in the morning, patient's pain was a 10 out of 10. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, patient's pain was a 2 out of 10. Whatever it might be, you've got the data there. If this says that I am going to assess my patient's wound, all right, well, there better be a box off of that that tells me exactly what that wound looked like. Okay, if I have a box that says I'm going to assess lung sounds, then there should be a box off of that that tells me what your lung sounds were. Lung sounds were clear and equal bilaterally. Lung sounds were diminished. Wheezes heard on expiration. Audible wheezes heard, but lungs clear on auscultation, okay? That's rare that would even happen. But anyway, you're getting my drift here. You need to have assessment data. If you say you're going to do it, give me the data as a result of the intervention that you did. You guys do a ton of work on clinical. Give yourself credit for it on this concept map. Okay, if you say that patient is going to ambulate in the hallway 4 times during your shift, then there should be a box over here. Patient ambulated X number of feet during their shift. All right, you can get a lot of assessment data off of your individual interventions. Okay, and the cool thing is they can kind of cross over between each other. So I'm going to just draw a couple of these on here so you can have an idea of kind of what I'm talking about. Okay, so give me 2 shakes here. I'm just going to put a D in these for data. Data is very important, you guys. It's very important to your concept maps, to us really understanding that you get all of the connections, okay? So, and honestly, I will tell you, we can kind of tell just by opening up a concept map how much information is really on there based off of the number of bubbles we see. Like I can look at a map and be like, wow, that's a wonderful skeleton, but there is no assessment data. There's nothing supporting any of the information that they put on this concept map, okay? So as we add our little data bubbles, So you can see here, I've got these data bubbles that are coming off of my interventions. Now, some of them might cross between multiple. So like this guy here, oh, this data piece, it works for this intervention. Hey, but it works for this one too. You can put it there. Now there's going to be information in your data collect or from your patient assessment that really doesn't have anything necessarily to do with your nursing diagnosis. So for example, let's say your patient, let's say your patient's diabetic. Okay, and you're not really talking about, and it's type 2 diabetes, they're here for something completely different. Yeah, we need to know about it. Diabetes is important and we need to manage that, but it didn't really fit down in any of your interventions. Well, that's where your medical diagnoses come in handy. You can add more data off of a medical diagnosis. You have a patient who's hypertensive. Oh, look, hey, we can add this high blood pressure off of my hypertension or off of my diabetes, all right? We can add multiple pieces of data. Now, not every medical diagnosis is necessarily going to have data attached to it. Your patient has BPH, they're urinating fine. It's not a big deal. When you get into your RN year though, that becomes an important thing to have on your map because when you're giving your Flomax and you need to put a medication on your map, oh, look, hey, I've got this random little BPH hanging out here. Oh, that's where I can attach my Flomax. Doesn't really have to do with what I'm doing down here, but it's still on my map. We're preparing you because these build. This is your basic level concept map. Next year, you're going to be adding more and more to this. So if we can get the basic concept of a concept map down, it makes it easier to build on it moving forward. Okay, and things can interconnect. All right, so you may have assessment data that goes between multiple interventions that connects up to a different nursing diagnosis. You can interconnect these. And you guys, that's what we're looking at on this very first part of your rubric. It says organization, presentation, and linkages. Is everything linked correctly? All right. Some of these are going to have multiple links that come off of them. And that is because human beings are complex. We were made as complex beings. So you're going to have more than one line. Okay. And that's okay. But we're looking to see, do you understand the connection between everything that's happening with your patient and why it's happening? And can you critically think through that? That is what your concept map shows us. Okay, so now we've got a concept map that's easy to understand. We've included our medical diagnoses. We now have our supporting data, objective and subjective. We have our nursing diagnoses. We have our interventions, our desired outcomes, and our evaluations. You've got yourself an A+ concept map. Okay, so very, very helpful information. Now, I'm a linear thinker. This works for me in lines. Not everyone likes the lines, you guys. Your skeleton can look however you want your skeleton to look. I'm gonna just quickly draw up another one here that this one is a little bit easier to use when you get into your AD year because you have to do 3 nursing diagnoses. But this one, it kind of reminds me of like a nucleus, to be honest with you. They do it like in pods, like a, like a Mickey Mouse head. Okay, so we start with our patient in the middle, and then all around it are the medical, those are M's by the way, all around it are the medical diagnoses. All right, now we're gonna make 3 pods, okay, with our nursing diagnoses. So I've got 1, 2, 3. So I have 3 pods, 1, 2, 3. These nursing diagnoses are going to connect in some way to my medical diagnoses. And they can connect to the same one. In this example, they connect to different ones, but they can all connect to the same medical diagnosis. That's okay. So I'm starting my pods. All right. Now I'm going to move into making my goal because we need to have a goal so we know what we're trying to attain. You just connect your goals to your nursing diagnosis. Okay. So now we've got our goals attached to each nursing diagnosis. Okay. Now I'm going to add my interventions. Okay, so I added my interventions around the edge here. Okay, we'll include our evaluation of our goal. Sorry, I usually grade the AD ones and the evaluation doesn't go separate. It's in the same box as the goal, so I didn't make room for it on this one. Whoopsies. So I've added my evaluations off of my goals. Okay, evaluation, evaluation, evaluation. All right, so now I've got my, once again, I've got my skeleton, my patient, my medical diagnoses, my pods with my nursing diagnoses, their interventions, my goals and evaluation. Now I can go in and I can start adding in all of my assessment data, and they can cross-connect between nursing diagnoses, between medical diagnoses. You can start adding all of these data points off of your interventions. Okay, sorry, I want to get a couple of these on here so that you guys can see how this looks. Now, obviously, you can have more data than what I'm putting on here, but right now I'm just trying to make it so that you can understand how you can have interconnectedness between your various. So see here, I've added my data points onto my interventions, and they can cross over to my medical diagnosis, to another intervention, to another nursing diagnosis. They can cross connect. Okay, so this you end up with 1, 2, 3 pods. Either way, all of your information is in there. And next year, when you need to start adding things like labs and medications, you've already established a really good skeleton and a really good goal for how you are going to create your concept maps. Okay? Now, what I recommend is create your skeleton and duplicate it every single time. You can create that skeleton. Once it's already made, it's really easy to just go back in and enter your information. Boom, 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 done. You've already got the layout. Now you just have to add the information. So it makes it a little bit easier. So this is how my brain works. It follows our rubric really, really well. You can see there's multiple ways that you can go about doing this. But at the end of the day, it's going to help you to get the grade for your concept map. It's going to help us understand your understanding of your patient and how all of the different pieces connect. And it's going to help you from pulling out your hair. Okay? So remember, use your rubric. Follow your rubric. Teachers may be slightly different. Your rubric is the same, and we all use the same rubric. Okay? Follow your rubric. Create your skeleton. Whatever your skeleton looks like, create it, learn it, love it, use it. Okay? And then make sure you've got all the information that you need. You will never be docked for too much detail. Okay? If we can't understand your map, that's something else. If your linkages are just crazy. But we're not gonna be like, oh man, you put way too much assessment data in this. I'm sorry, but F. No, you will never get that, okay? We want to see that you understand the information, that you understand the connections for your patients, okay? Use individual boxes. That helps us to see the connections that you are making between specific assessment data or specific history or specific interventions and the outcome and the result. All right, so those are my tips and tricks. I hope that this was helpful to you. Oh, and then don't forget to reference. Oh, I almost forgot that. Don't forget to reference anything that is not your own work, which at this point is everything. Reference. All right, you need to do APA style reference. Usually that's going to be your nursing diagnosis book. So if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Concept maps are kind of my baby. I hated them when I started teaching because I didn't understand them, and now I love them. Now that I understand how they work, why they work, and how effective they are. So if you guys have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, you guys, have a wonderful day. I hope this was helpful.